witches run Black Lives Matter?
And maybe I'm sharing too much, but we become very intimate with the spirits that we call on regularly, right? Like each of them seems to have a different presence and personality. You know, I laugh a lot with Waukesha, you know, and I didn't meet her in her body, right? I met her through this work.
It's a very important practice. Hashtags are, for us, are way more than a hashtag. It is literally almost resurrecting a spirit so they can work through us to get the work that we need to get done. I started to feel personally connected and responsible and accountable to them, both from a deeply political place, but also from a deeply spiritual place. And always, you know, in my tradition, you offer things that your loved one who passed away would want, you know, whether it's like honey or tobacco, things like that. And it's so important, not just for us to be in direct relationship to our people who've passed, but also for them to know we've remembered them. I believe so many of them work through us.
Black Lives Matter is ran by 3 witches who are lesbian witches: Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opa Tometi. She's of Nigerian descent. They are all 3 are part of the Black Boule Secret Society, and there are witches, they're warlocks, and the entire spiritual dogma or doctrine of Black Lives Matter is from the West African religion called Odu Ifa, capital O-D-U, then spacing capital I-F-A. But over 3,000 different religions in Africa, or Akibalon, is rooted in witchcraft and divination.
I feel like in our traditional practice, and people who practice, you know, traditions from West African places, one of the big things is remembering your ancestors. And I feel like part of the story, the building of BLM was about remembering and remembering our people, not based off of the white supremacist memory, which would be about, you know, slandering them and putting their names in the newspaper and showing their mugshots, but instead remembering them from the place that their mothers and their fathers and their family would want us to remember them in, even if we didn't know them personally.
So these 3 witches, Alicia Garza, Opa Tometi, okay, and Patrice Cullors, are using the psyop of the witchcraft religion of Odu Ifa, which concentrates on 16 points of demonic possession and demonic influence through demonic performance of what? Libations. Because the term light, the liquid of darkness.
When we come out into the streets and we pray, you know, the first thing that we do when we hear of a murder is we come out, we pray, we pour libation, we build with a community where the person's life was stolen. And it took almost a year for me to realize that this movement is much more than a racial and social justice movement. At its core, it's a spiritual movement, because we're literally standing on spilled blood, right?
Yeah.
And you can't pretend like that's work that's just like some organizing work. That's, you know, that's some serious stuff, right?
They give libations, they pour liquid, what they say, unto the gods of Africa. It's all built on witchcraft.
When we say the names, right? So we speak their names, we say her name, say their names. We do that all the time, that you kind of invoke that spirit, and then those spirits actually become present with you, right?
So then Black Lives Matter has 16 chapters in the United States and in Canada, which each chapter represents a name of a god or goddess in the Ifu religion. Ifu, which has 16 points, 16 chapters of demonic possession. Black Lives Matter, they're operating through both omnikinesis and telekinesis. It's witchcraft. Wherever they go to create mayhem and destruction, they send witches. Every satellite head, every person in chapters of Black Lives Matter, they are a witch and a warlock. So with Black Lives Matter, they have molded themselves after a serpentine psychology. All 3 of these women are witches.
Spirituality is at the center of Black Lives Matter. And I think that's not just for us. I feel like so many leaders and so many organizers are deeply engaged and a pretty important spiritual practice. I don't think I could do this work without that. I don't think I could do it as long as I've done it and as consistently. It feels like if I didn't do that, it would be antithetical to this work.
To defeat Black Lives Matter, to defeat the ANC, you can't defeat these organizations through the barrel of a gun. You can only defeat the ANC and Black Lives through spiritual warfare.
In the Bible, both the Old and New Testament, it's clear that when we die, we no longer have cognitive thought, or, obviously, the ability to communicate, as if we are asleep. But man dieth and wasteth away. Man giveth up the ghost. And where is he? As the waters fail from the sea, and the flood decayeth and drieth up, so man lieth down, and riseth not, till the heavens be no more. They shall not awake, nor be raised out of their sleep. Job 14:10-12. So, if the founders and leaders of Black Lives Matter are in fact communicating and speaking with spirits or entities, who are they talking to? Demons? Or are they just talking to themselves? Whether actual contact is made or not, these sort of practices are forbidden by God, as clearly described in Deuteronomy 18:10-12. There shall not be found among you anyone that useth divination, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. Again, is Black Lives Matter run by witches, or just crazy?
So who exactly benefits from the Black Lives Matter movement? It certainly isn't the families left to grieve the 38 children who have been slain in Chicago alone this year, which even includes babies according to 5 Chicago News, and it also hasn't supported the large amount of Black-owned businesses that were destroyed during the protests for Black Lives. The Hustle shared just 3 of the many entrepreneur stories whose businesses were damaged during the chaos. Now, these were already businesses that managed to survive through the economic lockdown measures enforced in 2019. According to Washington Post, Black businesses were already struggling 40% more than others due to restrictions. Now, according to one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, the primary purpose of Black Lives Matter is, in fact, a matter.
What we are going to push for is a move to get Trump out, while we're also going to continue to push and pressure Vice President Joe Biden around his policies and relationship to policing and criminalization. That's going to be important, but our goal is to get Trump out.
I see. The primary goal of Black Lives Matter's movement is to get Trump out. Makes sense. Even though racism existed before President Trump. Now, this really does broaden the types of groups and individuals that might benefit from the success of the Black Lives Matter movement, doesn't it? Maybe even governments who wish to exert their power and dominance over the world, like the Chinese Communist Party, would find some solace in the demise of the U.S. economy and civil unrest of its people. After all, it wouldn't be the first time racial inequalities was partly being manipulated to benefit a group who wanted something more out of America, something that has absolutely nothing to do with Black lives being protected. I'm going to show you a quick clip from the channel Civil Rights and Communism. In the clip, you'll hear from Julia Brown, who was a member of the Communist Party and an undercover FBI agent during the civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King. Now, I doubt you'll learn about this piece of history during Black History Month, and that's because Brown claims that the communist plan was to bring violent revolution to America during the 1950s and 1990s. Take a look.
It was to be a communist revolution. But the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize that until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights. Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people, to keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure. Having been on the inside of the Communist Party, it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it's hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be.
Right? It makes you think just a little bit harder, especially when an organization that is extremely loyal to and has deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party has actually teamed up with Black Lives Matter co-founder. For those of you who have signed up on our newsletters or for our newsletters at rebelnews.com, you may have already read a report that we gave you bringing attention to this peculiar relationship. I want to expand a bit upon that article and highlight just how little sense this union makes from a we care about Black lives standpoint. The self-proclaimed Marxist Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza also owns the Black Futures Lab project. A primary goal of the Black Future Lab works is to transform Black communities into constituencies that wield independent Black political power at the municipal, state, and federal level. To help do so, the organization has partnered with 15 Black-led grassroots organizations in 9 states to register 10,000 new Black voters and get 50,000 people to pledge to vote. They call it Black to the Ballot. That's great, right? It's catchy, and I think everybody should vote. However, I do question what the encouragement to vote from organizations run by co-founders of Black Lives Matter who would like or say in their own words that their main goal is to get Trump out. Yet, all would be lost for the Black Future Lab if not for the Chinese Progressive Association, CPA. Right above the option to donate to the organization reads, Black Futures Lab is a fiscally sponsored project of the Chinese Progressive Association. As we pointed out in our article, donations to the Black Futures Lab don't go directly to the foundation itself. The Chinese Progressive Association gets them instead. Maybe you have heard of the CPA before. According to the Heritage Foundation, the CPA began as a leftist pro-People's Republic of China organization promoting awareness of mainland China thought and workers' rights, dedicated to self-determination, community control, and serving the people. In an article by the Daily Signal, it outlines reasons why the connection between the CPA and the Chinese Communist Party makes it clear that the CPA works with China's communist government, pushes its agenda here in the US. But since when does the CCP really care about Black lives and even human rights for that matter? An article by CTGN highlights the hypocritical condemnation of the US by the reporting that the Chinese foreign minister said that Black lives matter and their human rights should be guaranteed, adding that after spokesperson Chao Lijian told reporters that we hope that the U.S. government would take all necessary measures to deal with the violent law enforcement of police so as to protect and safeguard the legitimate interests of racial minorities. I'm sorry, but China isn't that the country currently ruled by the authoritarian government that has been persecuting Christians, putting genocide to the Muslim Uyghurs, and is overtaking Hong Kong right now? And since when does China's government care about Black people? They literally toss them out onto the street by landlords, hotel managers, and local officials, as reported by Foreign Policy of the pandemic, where the virus was birthed. Can you imagine? So what's the deal here? Is it simply a coincidence that the Marxist co-founder of Black Lives Matter movement is being sponsored to help rally up Black voters in America? for the upcoming election by a organization that's loyal to the CCP? Or is everything all good as long as it's painted under the expression Black Lives Matter? Drea Humphrey for Rebel News.